Hi everyone, Colin here. Something occurred to me that was kind of interesting and I thought I'd share with you. It's another use for the Domino REST APIs and using static site generation. It's, I think, quite an interesting way to use the Domino REST APIs, and I'll tell you some more. First of all, what and why? What the heck is static site generation and how would it come into play here? So static site generation, typically what we mean is if you start with the end state, we're generating a static site. That part's not that interesting. But what modern web frameworks let you do is take what should be dynamic data stored in databases or other data stores, and as part of your build phase, obtain it and output static sites with it. And it's not using crude templating, it's using modern full stack development techniques that do what a server-side rendered app would normally do. So on this diagram, you'll see in the middle is a database, say it's a Domino database with products in it, a whole bunch of products. And maybe it was managed, so this is user-created content, user-created data entered by end users through a data entry app. Maybe it was a Notes client app, maybe it was a web-based app through whichever tech you're using for that, against Domino. In any event, the data is stored in Domino. And what's going to happen is at build time, during the build, you determine what are all, if the idea here is to generate product pages, the first stage is to go out and say, what are all the products? And get me a list of the products that I need to get data for. And then for each of those products, get complete product data by calling Domino REST APIs. So if you look in the middle of the screen, here we're going to call the Domino REST APIs, first getting a list of products that we need to generate statically. Second, getting the product data for each one and statically generating those pages. Now, the output is a bunch of static assets as if we hand-coded a site, except we didn't hand-code it at all. Nothing's hard-coded. And if you go in and update something in the database and then run a build again, a build of your front-end app, it'll regenerate all this dynamically. So what does a production deployment look like? It's simple. You copy your static assets to a web server, and if you've got a CI/CD set up, it would be automated. Also, it's noteworthy that a production deployment, even though much or most or all or some, depending on what makes sense, can be statically generated, some routes, meaning some pages or some paths, may still use dynamic data. So let's take a look at a simple example, which should make sense. So say we had an e-commerce site where we had product info about a bunch of products, but we also had a shopping cart. Presumably the products don't change that often, and so they're really good candidates to pre-render them or statically generate those pages. They don't change minute by minute. Conversely, the shopping cart, if you add something to your shopping cart, that's dynamic. If you update a quantity of an item or you remove an item, that has to be updated in real time. So that needs to be calling a back-end API. And statically generated pages, first of all, they're very easily indexed by search engines. Not all single page apps today share that attribute. Some of them are difficult to index. Search engines are getting better. They do execute JavaScript, by the way, so it's a misnomer that they can't handle JavaScript or can't handle frameworks. They can, but it's not perfect. And some of it is how will you be penalized for the performance of it, or how accessible is it deemed to be, how does it perform according to core web vitals, etc. So you're definitely rewarded for it being extremely fast, and these are extremely fast, and they're served by a static web server or a content delivery network. And you can also take advantage of aggressive caching, and it's cache safe as well. So if content changes, there's hashes built into these files, so it'll serve a new file name and it'll invalidate caches on CDN. So it is actually safe for caches. And then another benefit is you don't actually have to expose the original app. So the build can run inside your network behind the firewall, figuratively or literally. And the data source that the build runs against doesn't have to be exposed to the internet. So that could be a win for some sites. You could be taking apps that are maybe internally used only to manage this data, statically generate this site, post it publicly, granting no access to the source system, which is nice. So that, by implication, that actually adds to security posture, because all you're putting out there is static assets on a web server. And there's other things you could use it for. So the first is headless CMS for websites. This has become the trend. If you do a search for Jamstack and you go to the Jamstack website, you'll see there's a plethora of solutions out there that do this with different technologies. You could integrate your Domino data alongside data from other data sources. And in a full stack app, you could static site generate infrequently changing data. You can also do it to benefit global apps with some users in high latency regions. Some web apps aren't well tested with very high latency. So if you pre-render content and distribute things geographically closer to your audience via CDN, or all the hyperscaler cloud providers have different ways to distribute static assets. They differ a little bit from each other, so I don't want to deep dive on that too much, but there's ways to get your content close to your audience that'll result in a much higher performance solution. And large employee experiences. You could reduce load massively by SSGing the infrequently changing content and keeping portions dynamic that should be dynamic. And finally, just think about a way to take a whole bunch of info and statically generate a whole site that you could put on a USB stick or copy to people's laptops so that they could open it up and peruse it without being connected. There's probably other things I haven't thought of, but I actually thought that this would be worth sharing, especially the first one, because now with a headless CMS, you're taking the same approach that tech in general has taken with this for many years now, in fact. So I thought it was an interesting use case for the Domino REST APIs that you might not have thought of. Thanks for watching.